me this one's going to go big.
Hello and welcome back to the channel. So then, it turns out there are more to refill keys than meet the eye. Or certainly more than I was aware of. Because coming out of the previous video, which is that fella there, that was the last video on the channel about fruit machine refill keys, where I talked about the fact that the only thing that they were useful for to me was checking the balance of the hopper to give you an idea of how full or not the machine was. And I surmise that they were useful, but they weren't kind of like a game changer. They weren't going to, really help you get any money out of the machine directly or anything like that. Turns out that's not the case, because there were quite a few comments left on the video, and we've had a chat about it over at Desert Island Fruits here. And it turns out that there were some slightly dodgier things that you could get up to with refill keys. Now, the bad news is that we don't have any working ROMs for this. I've checked with our resident ROM gurus over at Desert Island Fruits, who have kind of an encyclopedic knowledge of all the ROMs that we've got and how they match up to all the various emptiers and dodgy tricks and tips there were on machines over the years, and we haven't got working ROMs for this, so I'll just have to talk you through it. The main one seemed to be extremes, and what you could do with extremes was a very specific thing with the trail hold behaviour that applied to quite a few machines in the £25 era that was chipped out. And the explanation that we got for that is as follows, and this is one of the working machines here. We do have a layout for it, but it doesn't work on these ROMs, and it doesn't work on the ROMs that we've got for the other extremes of the era that you could do this trick with the refill key. But basically, this is how it went. So what you needed to do was get 3 trail holds to get on the board if you were on trail position 5 or more, a bit like every other machine of the time. That was pretty standard. To get those 3 trail holds, you could just turn the refill key twice after the first one. When the game came back out of the refill menu, it would repeat the initial trail hold from the original spin, but it would register it as the second one you needed and then the third. Next spin, it rolled in numbers to put you on the board. Once you'd rinsed all the value out of them, they stopped trail holding. They were good for picking up £20 and £30 raises around the pubs, sometimes more on a unit that hadn't been played properly. People would file the edges down a bit on their refill keys to make them smoother to shove in and out quickly. Code-wise, I don't remember any machines at the time that would repeat the trail hold after coming out of the refill menu because you'd already been given it. These games did. That's the extreme. So the behaviour on the extremes was different to how other machines handled the trail held in the code. So extremes did this, and that's where the issue lay. The same trail hold could be applied multiple times in the same game in this unique way. The game would restore to the point before the trail hold and not afterwards, hence it being given again. With this manipulation, you could get the trail hold counter to go past 1 without committing further credit due to a simple code-based error and a bug that wasn't picked up during testing. So that seemed to be the main one on the extremes. There were a few comments talking about the extremes, and some people mentioned that on Desert Island Fruits, but that's the most detailed explanation that we got for it. So in essence, what you're doing is manipulating the trail hold behaviour because the code is going back to the wrong bit. I mean, what I can show you here is if we put a credit in like that, let's just play 1 spin, but we've got nudges, so it doesn't matter, I'm not trying to get anything. Now, what happens here, can you see, if I turn the refill, so that's the equivalent there. I've just ticked the box in the emulator. On the real machine, that's putting the key in. And when you come out like that, now the trail hold is still there. But the difference is now that on the unchipped ones, what happens is that goes back and then counts it as a second hold. So the code actually goes, see there, the trail hold is gone. But what you could do with the refill key is every time you get a trail hold, and it would have to be above 5 as well, by the way, so that wouldn't really count there. What you have to do is, let's just try and get it up so we can kind of, oh no. So, oh, it might do a, so there you go. So we've got a trail hold at 5 now, and you need 3 trail holds above that position. So what you could do there, you see, is put it into refill mode like that. And then what it'll do, see there, the trail hold has gone. But by turning your refill key, you sort of rewind the code. Because when you turn your key, can you see there, the game goes into a different mode. It's out of play mode now, and it's into refill mode. So the code has had to go off into a different branch. But then when you turn your refill key back and take it out, what happened on the unchipped ones was the code actually went back too far, and then you could get trail holds above 5 that you weren't supposed to get. So in essence, the machine was just giving you boards when it didn't want to give you boards, and you could take any value out of it that it had. There does seem to be agreement as well that once you had completely emptied the compensator, so there was no value whatsoever in the machine, they would just stop trail holding at 5. So you could I guess that would be a pretty good tell for you. If you're not getting any trail holds at 5 or above, you know that it's been done and to walk away. But it seemed to be that you could get £20 to £30 out of every single unit, maybe a little bit more depending on the play that it had had. And there were people in the comments who were saying that they just made entire rounds out of extremes, that they would just go out and do a full shift, you know, like a 9-10 hour shift, just going, taking in as many pubs and arcades as they could, just doing this refill key trick on extremes, and you could clear a large amount of money in a single day on these things. And they didn't really need a huge amount of play to get ready again, because you just need that little bit of value in the compensator, and then you can take it all out by doing that trail hold trick with your refill key. Now, I didn't know about this one, but the truth of the matter is, and I talked about this in the previous video, I eased off a lot in the £25 and £35 era. I did not play machines nearly as much as I had at the back end of the £15 era. I went really, really hard for about 18 months when I started to get my good information and my good tips and tricks, empty as manipulators. I had my refill key, and for about 18 months I treated it like a second job and made, honestly, quite a lot of money. Nowhere near as much as I'd lost during my addicted decade, but I made a chunk of it back. But then going into the £25 era, I actually made a pretty conscious decision to really ease off, because I proved to myself that it was possible to win on fruit machines. I also then understood how fucking bent they'd been for all of that decade of me losing, like how I just didn't have a chance. I'd also proved that I had the discipline to do it properly. And, you know, my life was changing at that time. My work was changing. Our daughter was born in 2004. And, you know, spending fucking hours and hours and hours going around the pubs doing fruit machines just didn't fit in anymore. So in the £25 and £35 era, I just didn't pursue information in the way that I had at the back end of the £15 era. So I really dropped off a lot in that regard. So you know what? There was loads of stuff going on in the £25 and £35 era, I'm sure, that I just didn't know about. And then I came back out of retirement for one last job in the £70 era. It was actually over at Jackpotty. Somebody that I've kept sort of in touch with over the years, right from the early days of fruit machine emulation. I mean, we've messaged each other about various things over the years, but in the £70 era, he actually dropped me a message over at Jackpotty and said, look, I know you don't really play that much anymore, mate, but if you're interested, there is a fucking bonanza to be had on the £70 machines. If you give us a shout with what you've got over there, I guarantee you'll be able to make some money. And that intrigued me enough to come back for one final blast in the £70 era. Again, truth be told, I made a good chunk of cash out of that. But the £25 and £35 era, in the middle, I did play, but it was more if I was out and about anyway. The days of going out to do rounds were very, very much diminished in the 25 and 35 pound era. So there was a whole lot of stuff like this that just passed me by. These extremes were around. There were quite a few of them around, so thinking about it, I could have probably done okay on it. What I usually do, I found them very flat profile. Apparently there were things you could do with real setups as well, which I didn't know either. Sort of separate from the refill key, there were certain real setups that you could do on them that would get you into the board. I didn't know that either. I generally just, if I was playing one of these, I just forced them. If they had a bit of life in them, I just forced them. They were pretty flat profile, so it didn't go too far wrong. But it turns out there was other stuff on them, including this thing with the refill key as well. Now, another one that got mentioned several times is this one here, Apache Gold by Empire. The information on this one appears to be, unbelievably, that in an early version, or the first release of the £15 ROM, and also on £8 ROMs, they actually left in something that would dump the hopper on the refill key menu. Now on this one here, if you turn the refill key, if you have a look at the options that you get here, can you see? It's what you would expect. You've got refill, last win, last bank, volume. That's it. I can believe it, even though it almost seems unbelievable. Apparently on early ROMs and on an £8 ROM, there was an option in there that would let you dump the hopper. Again, that was chipped out. And also, again, I've checked over at Desert Island Fruits. The same applies. We do not have any ROMs where I can show you this. All the ROMs that we have are later releases where this was fixed. That, to me, the thing is, right, when I made this video here, I just thought, surely, even the fruit machine industry, given everything that we know about it, surely even they can't fuck up refill keys. Like, how do you fuck up the refill key? And yet it turned out it was. I mean, more fool me. I should know better by this point in time. But what comes to light is that, yes, it was way beyond what I thought it was. So you've got, I mean, that extreme one, that's a little bit dodgy. This Apache Gold one, I don't know. I mean, if you're putting a key in to get money out, okay, yes, the option is there. But if you're physically interfering with the machine to directly get money out of it that you shouldn't have, I think you're probably into dodgy territory legally there. If you got caught doing that, and, you know, if the arcade or the pub or whatever took it as far as, like, getting the police involved, I think you'd find yourself in trouble with that. So there was a suggestion as well that you could mess with other machines. There were some projects that were vulnerable and also some Epoch Tech cabs that were vulnerable. Two different things going on. One of them, the suggestion was over at Desert Island Fruits, and I think this was for the project machines. Joker Poker apparently had this problem on it. So what you had to do was wedge the flap that the buttons are on and hit the button inside with a ruler or a stick, and then use your refill key to dump the hopper. So at that point, obviously, you are physically interfering with the machine. You don't have to smash it open, but you have to get the flap open enough to get a ruler inside. I guess you're touching a button or a switch inside, and then with that in combination with a refill key, you can then dump the hopper. Obviously, we're proper into illegal territory there, and your best case scenario there is that you get chucked out. The worst case scenario there is obviously you are going into the realms of criminal activity. But once again, the refill key was pivotal to that, and that goes back to the other one, which was the Epoch Tech cabs as well. And the suggestion there was that it was a combination of a clicker. We talked about clicking before. That was a way that you could do a plugging of a machine. You could do that with a clicker. You know, those little electric clicky things that you could light gas fires with. But a combination of a refill key and a clicker. On certain machines, the suggestion was the Simpsons cabs that Epoch machines were in. You could do that. So that was a refill key and a clicker. Once again, you're into shady territory there, but that was a thing as well. Also, some other machines that you could do it with on the Trail Hold. Their Hyper Viper was mentioned, a £5 Hyper Viper, which if you could get it to trail position 8 and then you could use your refill key, it sounds a little bit like the same thing that we had on the Extremes, where you could rewind the machine a little bit and it'd give you the trail holds to put you on the board, and that would give you essentially an empty as well. So there you go, that's about the size of it. I'm sure there was other stuff as well, but they were the main ones that have been mentioned. And I guess that the main headline point is that my assertion there, which was true from my point of view, that was what I did with a refill key. I used it to get balances on hoppers. And there was a couple of people over at Desert Island Fruit said, yeah, that was the same era I used the refill key, and that was what I used it for as well. But coming out of the video there was all of this extra information, which was a whole load of other stuff that you can do. But some of it there is clearly crossing over into the realms of, let's be honest, illegal activity that is potentially going to get you into some serious bother if you get caught. But it also feeds into, I guess this is, and how can I put this? It almost, on some level, I almost feel a little bit sorry for the fruit machine manufacturers because of what they were up against. I'm not letting them off the hook for all of the nonsense that they messed up and got wrong, and the manipulators and the emptiers and the way that these compensators worked. The one there on that Extreme alone, where with a refill key, by essentially messing with the code and rewinding it to the wrong point in time when you put it into and out of refill mode, the agreement on that one was that it wasn't a full empty, because the machine would just stop trail holding. When it had no value in it, it would stop trail holding. But what you could do is essentially take every last penny of stored value in that machine out. The compensator is going to be completely on its arse. So anyone who comes up to that machine after that's been done is going to have a really, really torrid time. And that compensator is then going to have to work its way up to getting some value in it. Very much like, can you dig it and Empire Strikes Back, which I had around here. And yeah, I'm going to hold my hand up, I did it as well. But you could leave those wanting 50, 60 quid for a board quite easily. So there is that side of things. I'm not letting the manufacturers off the hook for that. But by God, they were up against it, weren't they? Because you've got this army of players out there, pretty smart people, pretty seasoned people who know all of the ways that you can fuck with these things. And it might, it's not always exactly the same, but a lot of these vulnerabilities when it comes to compensated machines and the physical design of the cabinets, things like the fact that they've all got refill key slots. Across many generations of machines from many different manufacturers, they've all got refill key slots, and you can bet your ass that players are going to try and find ways around this. Some of them may be prepared to go further than others into the dark arts, as it were, but this is what the manufacturers were up against. And essentially, you've got these machines all over the country that are literally stuffed full of money. And people are going to try and work out ways to get that money out of them, dare I say, by fair means or foul. And a really extreme example of this, and this is not refill keys, but it is an example of what kind of fruit machines had to face. I don't think I've told this one before. If you've heard it on another video, I can't remember. There's like 250 odd videos on the channel now. So if you've heard this story before, I do apologise. But I promise you, it's absolutely true. And you're going back to, it was in the £25 era. So you would have been in maybe somewhere between, 2002, 3, 4, something like that. And I was back in Manchester. I was back in Radcliffe. I was staying with my dad. And what I did, for old time's sake, I had an afternoon to myself. I can't even remember why I was over there. I might have been over there for some kind of training, something work-related, or just on a family visit, whatever it was. But I had an afternoon to myself. So I thought, for old time's sake, what I'll do is go around all the old haunts. I'll go for a few beers and play the fruit machines. This is in the £25 era, so unlike back in the 1990s, when I was just the clueless addict going around filling all the machines up in these pubs, I could go around with a bit of knowledge and enough of a bankroll to take on machines. And I did a proper hike around all the old stomping grounds. And one of the pubs that I went to there, the Royal Oak I went to as well, but I also went to the Lord Raglan, and in here they had 2 fruit machines. Now, this is not a pub anymore. You can see there, it looks like it was, if you go back to, where are we? In 2016, can you see there, the building was up for auction in 2016. But if you go back further than that, so as far back as we can go, you can see it was still a pub in 2008, but I would have been in there, let's say 2003, 2004, and this was one of the pubs that we used to go in all the time in the early 1990s, and I was in that side there, which is the pool room, and they had like a bar in the middle there, which stretched through to both sides of the pub, and at both ends of the bar in this side, they had a fruit machine, there was a pool table there, it was a sort of a midweek afternoon, so it was quiet. The barman was through this side, there were a couple of other customers in there, and I was just through here playing one of the fruit machines, and I'm stood there with my pint playing the fruit machine. Couple of frankly pretty rough looking lads came in, went to the other fruit machine, and I swear to God, they started tooling it. They had a tool about them, and they were trying to like really putting some force into the cab to try and get it open. And I sort of looked over, because obviously this made they were trying to do it like discreetly, but there was some noise and there was clearly some physical effort going on. And this was going on just a few feet away from me at the other end of the bar. And I sort of looked over at them, and they looked over to me, and there was almost kind of I was like, yeah, right there, mate. And I was like, fucking what? And I was just there with my beer, and I was playing the machine. I thought, what the fuck is going on? They're just tooling a machine in broad daylight. Yes, there was nobody else in there. There was just me and these 2 guys at the machine. There were no staff in there or anything like that. But is this where we are? They're just tooling a machine in broad daylight. They did their thing. I was so flabbergasted. I sort of can't even remember what. I kind of like froze. Like there was a bit of me thought, well, hang on, your machine's getting tooled, your fucking machine's getting fucked with. I'm like, what if one of them just stabs me? And I'm like, well, this is, if they're prepared to just fucking come into a pub and start tooling a machine in broad daylight in the middle of the day, maybe they're prepared to fucking jam the thing into my stomach. So I thought, and it was so surreal. So I'm there with my pint, playing a fruit machine while this one's getting tooled just a few feet away from me. I can't even remember what happened or how it finished, if they got something out of it or they just gave up or something. They were only there for a short period of time, and then they disappeared again. And I'm just there playing my fruit machine with my beer, and I'm like, wow, this place is... I mean, it was never a posh area. You can kind of see here. This is not a fancy area, but it was never that bad. I'm like, crikey O'Reilly's, is that what we've come to here? So... yes, that's not a refill key, obviously, but if that's the sort of thing that fruit machine manufacturers and fruit machines, as it were, these poor little machines just being sighted, and that's the kind of thing that they're inflicted to. We know for a fact that they're getting plugged and sparked and blowing power supplies and all the rest of it. So it really was an arms race between the sort of manufacturers of these machines and the players, and then outright, I mean, let's just call it what it was. That is just outright criminal behaviour there. To physically try and smash into a machine to do something to it with tools is obviously just, basic criminal behaviour. We can't pretend that that's anything else. And some of what we're talking about here as well, if you're sort of forcing a flap on a machine open to jam a ruler into it, and then turn a refill key to get a hopper dump, obviously you're into shady territory there as well. And that maybe feeds into the fact that I made the correct decision in stopping using my key when I did, because even though I never did any of that stuff, I put the key in to get a hopper balance, but that was the limit of it. But if you've got other people going around doing other things, maybe that puts you into a space where you know, the staff or the operator are going to be paying more attention. The worst thing that happened in that video there was the lad that I knew around here who was going around and fucking about with the volume. But from those stories, from the comments on the video and the stories at Desert Island Fruits, there was far more going on. And that feeds into me. I was just getting this sense that using my refill key wasn't a safe thing to carry on doing, and that even though what I was doing would probably survive any legal interrogation, what I didn't want to happen was I got caught and then basically just got banned from all the pubs in the area. Because I mentioned in the previous video they had this sort of pub ban scheme going on where you got banned from one pub, you got banned from all the pubs. I really didn't want that to happen because I was making good money on the machines at the time. And on that, I'll kind of finish with this story here. There's a couple of comments on the video, a couple of posts here over at Desert Island Fruits along the same lines, but we've got this one here which says, "To this day, I'm still not allowed to play the fruit machines in my local Wetherspoons because I was very drunk one evening, popped in on the way home and had a refill key, so shoved it in the donned perfect game, only for it to turn out one of the managers was sat right behind me off shift with his mates having a few drinks. I basically just got a tap on the shoulder saying, 'That's cheating, mate,' and my next visit he just happened to be on duty. Over the years he did slightly calm down from 'You're not allowed in here, mate,' to 'You can have a drink but don't think about going on the machines.' I still took the risk on many occasions at the time if I clocked he wasn't around, as they had a period of an extremely strong lineup of machines. As I said, it was just a drunken, I've got a refill key in my pocket decision at the time, rather than anything of great use, as you could easily read the state of a machine just based on how the boards play anyway." So again, that feeds into what I was saying as well, is once you get a little bit more knowledge of a machine, of how machines play, of how those compensators are working and how the different pots work and the blocks and all the rest of it, the refill key was becoming less useful to me anyway, even by the end of the £15 era, because I kind of had enough knowledge about what was going on to not really need that hopper balance to get an idea of the state of the machine. The other thing that happened, of course, going into the £25 era is machines got note changes on them. So the hopper balance was not necessarily indicative of how much money the machine had been taking, because people could be putting in notes and then it would pay out in coins, or people could put a note in, play some of the credits, and then collect the rest of that money as coins because they wanted some money for the jukebox, a pool, or whatever. You could kind of use fruit machines as change machines. So once note acceptors came onto the scene, or note changers, that hopper balance became far less useful anyway. So there you go. Just wanting to cover that. Where I make a video and, you know, I'm missing stuff out, or I'm kind of wrong because there's just stuff that I didn't know about, I do like to do a follow-up video to add that extra information on. The simple truth of the matter is, folks, I did not know about any of this stuff. So when I made that video, it was about the stuff I knew about. But there was like I say, a fair weight of comments on that video, a good chat over at Desert Island Fruits to say, "Yo, Degsy," there was a whole load of other shit that was going on with refill keys. Some of it a bit more dodgy, like the extreme trail hold thing. Oh, yeah, okay, you'd probably get away with that. But obviously, some of the hopper dump on Apache Gold, even though you weren't having to physically interfere with the machine beyond putting the refill key in, I think you're into shady territory there. And obviously, once you get into jamming flaps open on the machine, shoving rulers in and all the rest of it to get a hopper dump, you're way beyond the pale there from a legal perspective. I'm personally not going to pass any judgment. It was just open warfare, really, wasn't it? And I suspect an awful lot of players like me, and this is a pretty common story, is an awful lot of people who end up being a player and being able to win on machines are very often ex-addicts. That was certainly the case for me. These things had their pound of flesh out of me for 10 years. So when I finally got a few tricks and tips and methods, you can bet I was out there trying to make some money. I wouldn't have done some of those things, but frankly, I'm not going to pass any judgment on those who did. But yeah, you would have got yourself into trouble if you'd got caught with some of them, I think. So let's leave it there. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll catch up with you next time. But for now it is, goodbye.